So, work. Well, the way we work, of course, has changed significantly over the generations. You think about laboring in the fields, operating in factory machinery, and now you've got knowledge and service-based sectors that comprise a lot of the economy. So as work has changed, so have workers' attitudes and expectations. Let's talk about that with one of my favorite business strategists. I love to chew these topics over with Fred Parrish, who is on the WHO Newsmakers line. Fred, welcome back to WHO in Des Moines. Good morning.
Well, good morning, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing great. Fred, I think one of the challenges is we talk about changing expectations by workers is you have all these generations in one workplace right now, don't you? And that makes it a real challenge for managers.
It sure does, because they all think quite differently. And it has become very complex over the last decade or so. Just for that very fact that the younger groups are looking at the workplace differently and looking at work differently.
Well, and we've gone from a generation, Fred, that expected to get a job with somebody. I know so many, for example, John Deere employees here in Iowa that you joined John Deere and you would stay with John Deere till you retired. And now your younger folks, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, it just is what it is. They're not as faithful to an employer, and that's really caused a lot of employers to change how they manage, right?
Well, that's exactly right. Baby boomers, for example, are at companies on average 10 years, and millennials are on the job for an average of 2 years. So you're right, it is significantly less. And it also has to do with technology and not necessarily wanting to be in the office, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. I'm a baby boomer. I used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
I think, they want to be able to be a little bit more mobile and even work from home a lot of the time.
Well, and I'm one of those guys, Fred. I don't come on the air and stereotype millennials. There's this stereotype that they don't work just as hard, but it would seem to me what we're missing when we stereotype like that is that technology you just mentioned, which means that millennials are really working all the time, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's true. I do think that they like their social time.
Yeah.
Obviously, look at social media. But, no, I think that's true. I think technology today affords them opportunities that I never had. If I was going to work, I needed to be at the office most of the time. Today, that's different, certainly.
Well, and so, Fred, can a baby boomer manage a millennial? That seems to me to be the challenge, since you've got such differences between the generations. I imagine, you work with a lot of companies, Fred, that you get asked about that a lot.
Yeah, I sure do. And in fact, I work with a lot of millennials who are business owners. And, I think, Jeff, it's about having respect for each other, being able to communicate openly, and understanding that not everyone in the world is the same as you are. I tell people all the time, I kind of manage by the saying that everybody's normal till you get to know them. And, everyone has something in their personality that's not going to match perfectly with yours. And so you just need to understand that going in and learn how to manage all those varying ideas and approaches to the workplace.
So what do you think, Fred, if we go back to this idea that baby boomers would join a company and would be there for an entire career, and millennials do like to look around for other opportunities, is that just the way it's going to be from now on, that younger workers do, what I would call gigs at a job and they look for another job? Or is there a way of managing to keep your employees longer?
Well, I think that if you can change the workplace, change the environment to be more compatible with that younger age group, you would have a better chance of keeping them on longer. But I do think that is really part of their thinking. the gig economy, for example.
Yeah.
About 30% of the workforce now has some kind of quote unquote gig aspect to it. Now, only about 10% rely on those kinds of arrangements full time. So it's not as pervasive as people are thinking, but it's certainly a factor that needs to be taken into account.
So finally, Fred, I'm going to go back to your earlier answer where you said that millennials need to have their social time, but they'll also work a whole lot. Has a younger person's view of work and its role in their life changed from when you and I were entering the workforce?
Yeah, I think we were conditioned differently than our children have been conditioned. I certainly look at my kids, and they are millennials.
Yeah.
And I see how hard they work. And one of my kids owns his own company. My daughter is a manager at another company. And they work very hard, very long hours. They work on the weekend. They work all the time. Now, certainly that's not the case across that whole age group, but that's not the case across the whole baby boomer age group either. So I think it has to do with your personal experiences, your personal upbringing, and your desire for attaining some objective at some point in the future. And I think that's true of really any age group.
That is business strategist Fred Parrish. Fred, I always appreciate your insight on these matters. Thanks for joining me today. Talk again soon.
Yeah, good to be back on with you, Jeff. Thanks a lot.